Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my Next Small Step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And we have here, picking up right where I left off, an attempt at a tundra orbit. And this is me actively discovering that even though the contract says that the perigee needs to be above 1 million meters, that doesn't mean that you should expect a 1.5 million meter perigee. Like the actual tundra orbit is much bigger than that. So I'm actively working on figuring out how to get there. But yeah, up ahead we have a whole lot of different things, different milestones that we're tackling. We're going after tundra orbit. We have our first manned suborbital launch coming up very, very soon. And then I have some attempts at going interplanetary at the end of the episode. So we will see how that goes. Let's get to it, shall we? All right, so we have another Tele 1D on the pad, ignition and lift off. We have cleared the tower. Fabulous. So this is going into a slightly strange orbit, but it's something that I've had a lot of trouble getting MacLeod to do correctly, and I'm fairly certain it must be some garbage that I'm feeding it. There must be something I've set up improperly. But I just have not been able to get this into orbit without manual intervention, and I honestly have never successfully gotten this thing into orbit, so this is my first hopefully this will be my first and last test of this orbit. Well, I don't know, that may not be true. I may end up using a tundra orbit for something someday. I can't imagine what, but it may be something that I could use, because the tundra orbit is something that is used in a very similar fashion to the Molniya orbit, where it hangs over a particular hemisphere or region for a long time during its orbit, and less time on other parts. So it is useful for communications, spying, and all that sort of thing. All right, so I am just going to let this go for now. I will be taking over, because that is not the correct burn. Like, by any stretch of the imagination, that is not the correct amount of burn that I need to get this thing into orbit. I have no idea why it thinks I need to burn that much, but it's not quite right. So I am just going to let the first stage and the booster stage, so first and second stages, kind of burn themselves out, and then I will take over from there. All right, another couple seconds on this burn, and I am going to let that burn out, and then I'm disengaging my autopilot, and we are just going to kill rotation, turn on my RCS, or circularize at this point while I'm mid-burn. There we go, we'll just do that. Yeah, because we definitely did not need to spend like 2,000 meters per second or some nonsense on getting this orbit circularized. We're just trying to get into a very basic low orbit so that I could manually fly the rest of this way up. And like I said, there must have been some garbage that I'd fed MacLeod that was making it do that. So it's just, I don't know what it could possibly have been, but such as it is, I'm not that worried about it. I've got a new redesign of a bunch of boosters coming up not too long from now, so it's always good to reconfigure your boosters every so often. And there we go. So we are now locked, which is great. Okay, now we have control again, so I can cancel this, kill rotation, and the nice thing is that we are using the AJ-10 series mid as our upper stage. So this was kind of like an Able Star. I'm not sure that this AJ-10 ever flew on an Atlas, but it flies on ours because I like it. And that is going to allow us to restart this as many times as we need to get into the orbit we are looking for, which is good because this is the orbit that we're looking for. So it's not something that we're going to be able to get to in one go quite yet. So I think what might honestly be best for that, and we can plan this manually, I think. No, manually, I say. And then, let's see, let's move up to our... Or honestly... So what we have here, I'm sitting here thinking out loud, but what I have here is I have the AJ10 mid, and then I also have just a generic thruster. So I have no issue using that generic thruster to do to finish out this burn, but we want to spend as much of it as possible, as soon as possible, on this burn with the larger engine. So we just want to burn towards our intended apogee of about 49 million meters. Oh, it looks like we're a little bit off, too. Gosh, wow, that's a lot off, actually. Well, hopefully that's fine. This is just an example orbit. It's not intended to be like the exact orbit that you're trying to get into, but, you know, it is good to have that as a guideline. Yeah, hopefully that's good enough. Gosh, what's our inclination? 61. I think that's within the minimums. Yeah, between 61.4 and 65.4. So we are going to need to tweak our inclination a little bit, but I have no reason to do that down here. We'll do that when we circularize. All right, so step one, we actually just want to burn basically right now. I had my control locked until this very second, so I haven't been able to do much yet. All right, so we are just firing up the engine, and I am just going to burn straight up for a little while. Not straight up, in a straight prograde direction for a while to get our apogee up, hopefully to where we need it to be, and we will do our corrections afterwards. All right, so our apogee is just about where we want it. I'm looking for... There we go, that should do. Let's see if we can't finish this with RCS rather than fire up this engine over and over again, because it might fail one of these times. So I'm looking for an apogee of 49187. Okay, so there we go with that. We have our correct apogee. Next step is going to be fixing our inclination, which I may need to do on our way back down. All right, so we're just going to fire up the engine to try to burn a little bit more normal. We just need to get to above 61.4, so we're just going to bring that up to 62 and call it good. Yeah, because we don't need to get this very specific orbit, we just need to get into an orbit that looks kind of like it. All right, and at this point, I am actually going to kick off this stage so that it doesn't kill all of my power. Everything's off, kill rotation. There we go, and off we go. Fabulous. We'll put the sun down. Turn on our avionics, and there we go. Perfect. So now all we got to do is get all the way up to our apogee. Okay, now we just need to circularize, basically. Orbit, prograde. Fire up the engine. And away we go. It's one of these generic thrusters, so that works just fine. So this is going to spend a lot of time in roughly this orientation, where it is looking down at the Earth from on high, and that will hopefully make sure that it is able to communicate with that particular spot. And that is the orbit that we are testing. So now it's just a matter of getting into the correct orbital period. And we are getting close now, 2353-ish. Okay, so let's just hold our position. 2354.04 and 2358. All right, so now we just need to hold this position. And contract complete. Let's advance sun down. Success! The Tundra orbit is highly eccentric and lets the satellite spend most of its time over the high latitudes. Fabulous work! We have done it, and that was a little bit weird to get it done, but we got there. All right, so we have some additional funds because I have accepted some new contracts, but first I would like to improve my vehicle assembly building a little bit and then throw a little bit more research and development way because we are now getting more science. All right, sitting on the pad finally is the beginning of our Mercury program. And of course, it had to be Johnny Flores flying the first flight of a suborbital Mercury Redstone. 3, 2, 1, ignition. And okay, really ignition this time. Decouple the tower, and off we go. We are away, and bringing it up into a suborbital trajectory to test out our Mercury capsule for the very first time. Fabulous. So let's make sure that we are doing every bit of science that we possibly can. And begin our turn. We are actually doing a suborbital flight crewed contract. So this is the kind of one that we'd be doing previously with our X-15. But we are doing this with our capsule, finally. Grab some screenshots for posterity, and we are on our way. So we are trying to get to about 190 kilometers, and then we will be testing out all of the features just like we did on Ham's flight before. So yeah, this is basically Freedom 7. Because of all the issues that I mentioned before in the historical Mercury Redstone 2 mission, where Ham ended up flying a little bit too far, a little bit too high, a little bit too fast, so that he had a really toasty re-entry. Or not toasty, it was just a high G load. They ended up pushing out Mercury Redstone 3 a little while to make sure that they had all of the kinks ironed out and that there would be no issues. Speaking of which, I've got my hand just kind of ready to go on that abort button just in case that I need it. But yeah, this is exactly the way that this mission kind of was intended to go down. It was Alan Shepard, of course, was the astronaut that did this flight in reality, not our intrepid Johnny Flores. But he was sent up and he came right back down in the ocean after about 15 minutes of flight. He made it to about 187.5 kilometers, so that's kind of where we're targeting. We're trying to get about that high, and that will get us the suborbital flight crewed contract. Although it looks like we might need to pitch up just a touch, just to make sure that we actually hit that altitude. It's a nice thing about flying manually and not using the automated systems. Oh, never mind. Actually, we are doing just fine because I have complete control over exactly how this goes down, even if it looks a tiny bit silly. All right, we are pitching down. Oh, he is actually reaching the G limit. That was a bit of a harder burn than I expected it to be. All right, so we have done it. We have gotten him to a 210 kilometer apogee, which is not super optimal, but it's totally fine. I think it's time to remove our booster. So let's launch off the escape tower because that is just fine now. We no longer need that, and we will now fire our posigrade motors and decouple from the booster. So that's great. Next step, we stage our thrusters and the capsule. And let's point ourselves prograde orbital. And there we go. So now we are on our way into our suborbital trajectory. Extend this antenna now that we are outside of the atmosphere, and there we go. Johnny Flores inside doing science, writing up his report. Actually, no, these reports have all been finished. I've done that long ago in the X-15. So this suborbital environment is nothing new to Johnny Flores, but it was very new to Alan Shepard when he was the first American. He was the first American in space flying up on the Mercury Redstone, and he was beaten by Yuri Gagarin by about 3 weeks. So we were so close to having that milestone, but we did not quite make it. As far as my performance, it's bad. It's real bad. The historical Mercury Redstone 3 was launched in 1961. So I am 5 years late on my man program after a couple of episodes of being able to say, oh, well, I've beaten this milestone by 2 years and this milestone by 3 years, and I beat Sputnik and blah, blah, blah. I have fallen woefully behind. But as I keep saying, that's not actually something that's important, and it's not really a measuring stick for which we will judge our the work that we've done. Learning things and having fun playing with these rockets is really what's important to me. And so we have completed a crude altitude record. It's been a little while since I've gotten one of those. And yeah, one of the things that Alan Shepard did and now Johnny Flores did while he was on orbit, or in his suborbital trajectory, was to test out the roll and pitch control and to pilot it like you would. So he actually was, in the capsule, in this tiny, tiny little capsule. And if you've ever zoomed in on my profile picture, it's me inside a Mercury capsule at the Kennedy Space Center. But it's, it was him just piloting this teeny, tiny little thing and just checking the controls and seeing how it worked and feeling that the, using the thrusters on this and, using the joysticks that they had gave him the feeling of control over the vessel and feeling like he had full confidence and control over what he was doing and where the ship was going. And I just think that must have been an incredible thing to experience. All right, so we have just passed our apogee because I was getting starry-eyed. So I think it's time now to see what we can do about flattening out our trajectory just slightly. I just want to see if in what direction I can have a helpful burn with my retro rockets, because we're coming down anyways. Like, that's not the question. But if I were to point, for example, radial plus, that would reduce my vertical speed, flatten out my trajectory a little bit, I think. Maybe it just pushes it out a little in that direction. But yeah, if I want to point myself a little bit up and a little bit towards our velocity vector so that we can have hopefully a smoother return. So let's go ahead and fire the retro rockets. Yep, so having a perhaps negligible effect, but yeah, mostly I wanted us to go just to bring up the curve just a little tiny bit. And yeah, so not a big effect, but it's fine. It's mostly about testing these modules. Although I don't think the solid rocket pack has a failure chance or anything. It's one of those parts that's kind of exempt, which is probably good. All right, we are just about to touch the atmosphere, so it's time to decouple our nose cone fairing and antenna fairing. We will arm the parachute, and it's time to get into the return position. So we know this is safe because we've had a fine time with Ham the Chimp's capsule coming back down in very similar circumstances. So I'm not stressed about that. But man, can you imagine re-entry? Can you imagine being inside of a capsule as, the plasma streams outside the vessel? And the heating is incredible, and any slip up in direction or in oh my god, I've got the camera going a little too crazy. But any slip up in direction, oh no, he passed straight out. Wow, how many G's was that? Oh my gosh, that was so many. Oh my god, we just knocked out Johnny Flores. But yeah, any slip up, any, passing out because you have a bad trajectory would cause you to, maybe black out and lose control at the wheel and hope. And if the automation failed somehow, then you could be lost entirely. Spooky stuff. But Johnny's okay. He's come back too, and he's requested that Mission Control not do that. So boosting forward and up with the retro rocket was not the right answer. All right, so we are coming down now. We are descending fairly quickly to the parachute pre-deploy point. The parachute has deployed, and we are descending gently now into the Atlantic Ocean, and hopefully our recovery goes better than Gus Grissom's did on the next Mercury Redstone mission, Liberty Bell 7, which I will not be recreating, but I can just say that there was a very controversial mishap where the hatch blew a little bit early, and it ended up sinking the spacecraft. Like, they ended up not being able to save it, and Gus himself was in grave danger for a little while there until he was fished out of the water by the helicopter crew. But I firmly believe that it was not Gus's fault, and the other Mercury 7 astronauts came to his defense, and Johnny Flores is partying out now. But they came to Gus's defense and did everything they could to prove that he did not make any mistakes, and it was a mechanical failure that caused the hatch to blow early and caused the loss of Liberty Bell 7. Which was eventually recovered, but it was lost to us for a while. But yeah, so that is it for our Mercury Redstone program as Johnny Flores just rocks out in the capsule waiting for the recovery crew. There is no reason whatsoever for me to launch another Mercury Redstone mission. There wasn't honestly a reason to launch these two, but I love this history. This stuff is so cool. So I love being able to kind of share that with you guys. So our next manned mission is very likely to be a Mercury Tele mission that will be orbital. So that will be super cool. All right, Johnny Flores will be on leave for a couple of weeks. I think that's totally fair and deserved. And oh, look at that. There's a new, this feels new. Yeah, retirement date changes have occurred, plus 154 days. That's nice. So now we can actually see what impact these missions have. I love it. So yeah, he is in it for another 3 years at least, which is cool. I like that he gets to carry over. All right, so that lets us scrap our Mercury Redstone 2 mission because we no longer need it. And that means it's time to talk contracts once again. So, something that you may have noticed that I took in my contract list before was flyby contracts. I have accepted both the Venus and Mars flyby contracts and designed a vessel that I think will get us to each of those destinations. I'm very hopeful that that will work out. Maybe it will. Hopefully it will. I guess we'll see when we launch, and I'll talk more about it then. In the meantime, we have a couple things that we could be doing here. I don't think there's any reason to do... Oh, you can complete the suborbital flight contract up to 3 times, which I don't think there's any good reason to do that again. It only wants us to get to 150,000 meters and return home safely, and yeah, it's a small reward, and it's not really worth it, I don't think, wasting time building a new rocket. Meanwhile, I could just take the first orbital flight contract, which will cancel all of those other contracts that I have, like the ones that I've been grinding on, quote unquote. The supersonic X-planes, experimental rocket planes, X-planes high, and that suborbital flight contract. So it will cancel that one a little bit early, but it will get us a huge payout up front and a good amount on completion. And it's also very easy, at least as far as this... As far as our current technological capabilities are concerned. We could have done this years ago, probably, but we didn't have the technology for capsules. But now that we do, the Mercury capsule is only about a ton, so that's like no problem whatsoever for the Atlas D, or the Tele D, as I've been calling it. So we will be doing this, and I think we can confirm that we'll get this done within the next 3 years. Gosh, I could have accepted this a long time ago and had most of $1 million funds. Dang it. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I have not been doing very well or optimally, and that is one of them. After the first couple of missions and contracts and stuff and hitting those milestones, I was really doing well, but now I'm just kind of poking around, doing stuff because it seems fun. I'm not really doing this to try to teach the optimal path through RP-1, but instead to give more of a historical context for how someone might play RP-1. Meanwhile, they want to give me about 100,000 funds to do the X-Planes High contract because it's been so long, and I don't see any reason why to tell them no. So yeah, we'll do that, and we've also got orbital flight crewed in there. We have to do the X-Plane contract before we do this because it will fail this contract automatically and we will get the big penalty and all that. We don't want that. So we will do this for a little bit of extra cash. I'll probably send our new astronaut up and you probably don't need to see that unless something horrible happens, which hopefully it doesn't. But yeah, there's been so many. I think that it's time to move on. All right, so one of the things that I'd like to take advantage of while I have all this extra funding is I'm still not going to do the vehicle assembly building upgrade. You remember me talking about that? The math has not changed. I still need to add a lot more points before that's actually worthwhile. I don't need to do EVA yet, but that's something that I'm going to be thinking about for the future. I also don't quite yet need to upgrade research and development, I don't think. Yeah, 50 points. Okay, so we still have all of this science to do at our current level of research and development structure, so I think that's fine. We'll get away with a little bit more. So that leaves us with just one thing, and that is a brand new launch pad. So that's right, we need to move to the level 4 launch pad because we have bigger things to do. There's only so much you can do with about 2 to 3 tons to low Earth orbit per launch. And so if we want to progress in the space program, it's time to start working on that. So we'll have that done in about 234 days. And that will allow us to build much bigger rockets, which, you know, is always very exciting. And we also have a lot of unlocks to do coming up very shortly with 1962 orbital rocketry. But before we get to that, let's buy a whole bunch of points. So I'm going to leave myself about 250,000 funds just in case, and also for unlocks that are coming up very, very soon. But until then, let's do a whole lot of that and a little bit of R&D as well. So that gives us 125 points in the vehicle assembly building and 101 points in research and development. Which is the increased VAB rate is going to be very necessary with the new 350-ton rockets we're about to be building. Oddly enough, that the flight of the X-15 made Johnny Flores happier and want to stick with the program much longer than the Mercury Redstone flight did. Plus 542 days. Well, that's nice, and that got us double the 46,000 that you see here, which is just excellent. All right. Goodbye, my wonderful X-15. You have served me very well indeed. All right, so finally, the thing that I've been complaining about ever so much, 1962 orbital rocketry. Yes, I am super excited about that. We are going to unlock that Agena part because I just assume that we are definitely going to use it. And yeah, now it's time to actually just start look at the configurations to see what our upgrades are. As my Intrepid 1 rolls out to the pad, you'll notice that things have changed. Yes, indeed. First of all, I have figured out why my audio was not working. There was some kind of issue with my recording software that has since been fixed. In the meantime, I have also updated RP-1 and RSS and MacLeod, like a whole bunch of things I have gone through and made updates to, which has left us with this absolutely gorgeous new terrain, because one of the latest updates to Real Solar System uses the big terrain modification, the overhaul that 1.8.1 stock uses. And so we get to leverage that same shiny new technology for the beautiful 16K textures that I have installed. So yeah, that looks lovely, and there's been a bunch of small updates and changes as per usual. But let's get right to our next launch. Night falls on our Tele 1D booster, but we are approaching our final launch time for the window to reach Mars. We have just 11 seconds until the launch, and we are all set here. We have Tele 1D that is on the pad, and I'll talk about the upper stage if it doesn't explode in flight. 1 second, ignition, and we have a launch failure. Disengage, disengage, shut it down. Ooh, that was actually really close. Oh man, I was ready to just be talking and yammer right through that, and that would have set us back quite considerably. But I managed to save it right before this thing leapt off the pad and tore itself into tiny, tiny pieces. But that means that we did, in fact, save it. So we are going to abort all of our guidance and all of that, and we are going to roll this back, and hopefully we can, the engineers and technicians can figure out what went wrong, and we can try again within this launch window. So we are going to recover to VAB. All right, just a couple seconds until ignition of the Tele 1D, and we have absolute garbage being plotted by MacLeod right now. There we go. I think we are all fixed up. Gosh, that was a little scary. But yeah, there we go. I think that was just left over from the previous launch. There was some weirdness with the way that KCT stored the vessel, but should not be a problem, fingers crossed. But we have indeed got good ignition. We have cleared the tower. We are on our way up into the plane of Mars. So we can launch directly into the inclination of Mars around the Earth, so that we can try to make that transfer window a little bit easier. Spend a little bit of that burn here getting into orbit instead of trying to correct on the way. But yeah, so this is, once again, the Tele 1D launch system that I have put together. We have a brand new upper stage that we'll talk about if we get to it. I have paid for extra telemetry and pre-flight because it is a brand spanking new engine with 0 data units. I just did not have time to test this engine before we hit this launch window to Mars, and so I just kind of gambled, and I said, you know what, we will give it a shot. I have a couple shots at hitting either Venus or Mars. If I hit both, that would be freaking amazing, but I'm really not counting on it, and I'm kind of saving up a little bit of money to cancel the contracts early if I need to hopefully not completely bankrupt my space program. But yeah, so these are pretty good contracts, and I think that they pay out a lot more on success than they do on, I don't know why I thought there would be any information for me here, but I think they pay out a lot more on success than they do on advance. So hopefully this doesn't completely bankrupt my space program, but even if so, I have some money banked up so that we will not end here either way. But yeah, we are on our way up. There's not a whole lot more to say about this, and we just have to keep our fingers crossed that we get a good orbit. All right, we have main engine cut off, and we are rotating around our Agena upper stage to be prepared for our circularization burn into orbit. We are just making sure that we are nice and steady and stable, and you can see a little spoiler of our probe on the end there, which has a nice big dish on it so it can talk back to Earth. And there we go. We have ignition and rotating down to finish circularizing this burn, or I guess start circularizing this burn. Our Agena B has lit. That's fantastic. So yeah, this is a brand new upper stage that I find to be very capable, and it works really well with the design of the Tela that I have put together. This also actually works well with the Thor that I have, to be honest. It does a very different thing and serves a different role, but the fact that it has 2 ignitions means that it is a very interesting engine indeed. And I've just gotten incredibly lucky that this thing lit up on the very first try. I was honestly expecting this to fail, and the burn's not over yet, so we still might. But we are attempting to get into a good circular orbit before we make our transfer burn off to Mars. So we want to save as much of this Delta V as we can. We actually have packed on, looks like a little bit extra. This has performed better than it even has in some of my tests. So we are going to see how this turns out. So yeah, we've got about a minute left, and not a ton to say about this design here. It's a pretty similar build compared to some of my other upper stage designs. I've still got the little web of RCS underneath that I use to stabilize the craft, orient it, and do ullage thrusting, all that sort of thing. The nice thing about the Agena is that it is not something that is pressure fed, which means that you can use a balloon tank, for example, to get a whole bunch of fuel for not a whole lot of weight. And I've just packed on a little bit of extra HTP, high test peroxide, which we can use instead of any of the better fuels, but it is something that doesn't need pressurization. And second stage cut off. We are in a good orbit. Go ahead and disengage that autopilot. That is fantastic. So yeah, we are in orbit with our Intrepid 1 vessel. We are just about at the transfer window to Mars. So now it's just a matter of getting us there. So I have launched into the plane of Mars, and so we can see that we are targeted there. And I think with 4,300 meters per second at Delta V, I can just like beast us over there, and that would be pretty darn exciting. So let's just see what we can get, just out of curiosity. Shoom, 40, 42. All right, so I have taken some time to plot us a course between here and Mars, and this is kind of what that trajectory looks like. So we are going to be burning very quickly to try to get there, and it's only going to take us a couple of months. We are not going to take the big long way around. I think that this will work. We are going to have to burn the entire Agena B stage and then a little bit of our generic thruster on the probe, but I think that will be that'll be just fine. So we are going to execute that burn here, and then we will have about another 120, 130 meters per second of Delta V to make corrections on the way, which I think will be just fine. Maybe, assuming this thing lights up. All right, so we have 40 minutes until our burn. Let's get ready for that. All right, so I've just had MacLeod. It is going to run this node for me. We rotate around, we can see that this is just absolutely lovely. Gosh, I really love all of the work that's been done to make this such a gorgeous mod. Just look at this. We see our shiny new Agena engine ready to go, hopefully. All right, we are whipping around. Prepare to start burn. Fingers crossed. Oh, man. Ah, shoot. All right, well, that does it for this one. It looks like we are not going to make it to Mars with this rocket. I could make an attempt at doing this again with the next one that I have building, but oh man, I was so close. I spent so long testing that. I spent so long designing this trajectory, but it's all for nothing. Oh well. This is what happens when you use untested upper stages to try to get yourself to another planet. But we gained ourselves, it looks like, 1,652 data units, which is good, I guess. Helpful or something. Man, that's frustrating. But, like I said, is what it is. I'm not sure this probe is actually going to work in this orbit, because it has a little bit of fuel on it, but it also only has, for communications, this gigantic dish, which is transmitting on the S-band at very high dBm, which means it is pointing... Here we are. So you can see that we are pointing this, this big beam, very narrow cone right there. So that is the place... Those are the places that this probe can communicate with when it is unlocked from the upper stage. So I think that that is just going to have to be okay. We're not going to be able to do much testing, even if we decouple this thing. So that's pretty unfortunate. I'll probably decouple it just to kind of see what that looks like. Although it might be better to just point ourselves retrograde and spend all of our thruster fuel deorbiting this thing, or at least getting close to it. There we go. Now we got all 4 of our thrusters burning, and that at least tests that those thrusters are working, because I had to change these up a little bit. But yeah, so this probe was going to be... This is actually not too dissimilar to the way that the actual Mariner program worked. Both Mariner 2 and Mariner 4 were the probes that made it to Venus and Mars. Each one had a precursor mission, like Mariner 1 and Mariner 3 were each missions that were attempts to get to those exact same mission profiles, but they had failures. So Mariner 1 had a guidance failure. Mariner 3 had, they think that the fairing didn't detach properly from the upper stage, and so it didn't have the correct guidance, and then it wasn't responding to commands. So yeah, both missions... failed catastrophically, but they had enough time to build and fly another rocket during that launch window. And I'm really not 100% sure that we'll be able to do the same. I'm going to make a shot at it, and I may have like MacLeod actually do the do the maneuver planning that time, because I clearly did not do a very good... well, I did a fine job, I think, maybe, hopefully, but... we probably would have made it to Mars, but I'm sure MacLeod would have done a much more efficient job of it. So anyways, we've got, let's see, we've got another Intrepid that is going to be finished in 52 days with the hopes that I was going to be able to hit the Earth to Venus transfer window. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch this one, and then I'm just going to see what I can get as far as... intercepts with Mars, and if I can't get to Mars, then I'm going to have an early launch for Venus, and then I'll have probably 1 or 2 shots at Venus using the same vehicle. So we're basically just all in on attempting these interplanetary missions. So yeah, I guess we'll see if we manage to make that happen. All right, 10 seconds to our next attempt, this time with Intrepid 2, which is following the U.S. tradition. First of all, ignition and liftoff. Fabulous. Following the venerable tradition of U.S. Interplanetary missions of failing first and then succeeding, although I really shouldn't speak so soon, there's still a very good chance that this is going to fail. With the extra pre-flight and extra telemetry that we got off of the previous mission, we now have 1,600 data units, which is a pretty darn good return off of one attempt, one test, basically. And I do feel very silly because I realize I could have banged out a sounding rocket based on the Agena B in like 10 days, probably. And that would not have actually helped me up all that much. But anyways, it's fine. We are making our second attempt at launching, and yeah, it's all about seeing if that lights up not once but twice, so I'll see you up in orbit. Alright, we are just finishing our coast with the Agena B upper stage, so we are about to find out if this is going to light. And there we go, looking good. Alright, so that has lit up and we are on our way. That's fabulous. Apparently there's some spin or something because my RCS is trying to correct for that. But yeah, anyways, so that has worked out pretty well. I'm pretty happy about that. We still have one more to do, and I kind of spent a really long time manually getting the trajectory to Mars with my last attempt at this. This time I'm going to just use MacLeod to just kind of see if it's still possible, because I haven't done a whole lot of planning interplanetary maneuvers in real solar system and therefore in RP-1, so it's definitely something that I don't even know if it's still possible to get a burn that intercepts with the amount of delta V that I have. Like, this is not stock where like it's very easy to make this happen. By the time you're going interplanetary in stock, you have basically all of the tools available to you. But I'm still working with relatively early technology. I think our total level of technology is still better expressed in like the early 1960s, like 1961, 1962 at the latest. Even though our actual date says 1967, the way to think about it is what year is your technology level? Because the actual year doesn't really mean anything unless you're trying to, you know, gauge yourself against real life milestones. So anyways, all that to say, I'm going to use MacLeod to just kind of see what a maneuver might look like to get there. All right, so we are just about to finish up this orbital insertion burn. And there we go. Fabulous. That worked out great. Very, very good. Okay, so we'll put that away. And now we have our lovely interplanetary probe and our Agena upper stage ready to go. It looks like we are going to indeed need to go around a little bit so that we have satellite coverage or connection to the Earth. Can't be planning maneuvers when you are not in contact, because they have to literally upload the, you know, program that would make this happen. Yeah, so let's do maneuver planner. Advanced transfer to another planet. Calculating very badly. Okay, so yeah, there is some possibility up there, it looks like. Let's see, lowest delta V. We are going to Mars. Departure in 2 years. Okay, well that's going to be the next one. Departure at any time now. Interesting. Any time now? Oh yeah, in the next hour. Wow, yeah, okay, so this looks like this will work. Hold on, let's see what this looks like. Yeah, looks like we might even get to Mars. It's going to be a little bit late, but that's totally fine. Having missed the front part of the window, I think that is just totally reasonable. Let's see. We're not including the capture burn, and we want a nice low periap. I'm so used to just saying periapsis for every single one, because that's the neutral term that is used by Kerbal Space Program in all of the UI and so forth. So I've always called it that. But I actually have gotten a lot of feedback from people asking me to use the correct terms for each body, like perigee, peraloon, that sort of thing. The one for Mars would be Periarian, which I hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much. I'll try. I will, but that is going to be something I'm going to stumble on a whole bunch, and it's going to make me spend a lot of time editing. All right, so I am not stressed at all about how long it's going to take to get there. It's going to take the better part of a year for us to reach Mars, but that's fine. I think we still have a lot of time on our contract. I think the contract comes with like 2 years of leeway, and yeah, whatever. That's cool. I'll get science when we get it. It would have been nice if we could have made it at the first part of this transfer window and gotten a much faster transfer. But is what it is. So MacLeod pork chop plots are. There's a little bit of a laser light show going on there. I'm not sure why. So MacLeod pork chop plots are what you see if you select advanced transfer to another planet in MacLeod, and it will give you this. Like, this works in stock just as well as in RP-1. And in general, what it tells you is it color codes the amount of delta V. So from red to bright blue is the gradient of color. With red obviously being really lots of delta V and the bright blue being not very much delta V at all. And then the two axes, you have time to departure on the x-axis, and on the y-axis we have transit duration. So you can see, like, by plotting that out, you can see, okay, this is a journey that will take me a lot longer to get there, and this is one that leaves later on. So you can see that the same shape kind of repeats, and so that means that the same sort of transfer maneuvers are going to be the same every single year. And so that's why it's something that I'm not too stressed about doing manually, because this is something that mathematicians and astrophysicists and astronomers have all figured out, like, very precisely. They know exactly what the maneuver is to get you from point A to point B, based on your inputs of how long you want the journey to take and when you want to leave. And you can see that based on the shape here, we have just missed, like, the first vast majority of this transfer window. So we have just this tiny little bit here that has a nice, really easy transfer, and a lot of it is like, okay, leave right now. So that is definitely what I am going to be planning on, and I'm also planning on a very low Periarian. Hold on, let me see if I can how to pronounce that. Okay, Periarian is what I'm seeing, so I'm gonna practice that, Periarian. But anyways, I'm looking for a very low Periarian so that I can get maybe just a tiny little hint of delicious low science on my way through. I'm going to be screaming through at probably tremendous velocity, so I don't think that that's going to be something that we're going to get a lot of, but it could be fun. And we might get a little bit of something, and I'm not going to stress about trying to, like, make my maneuver hit Deimos or Phobos or something on the way either. Like, I'm not stressed about it. I just want to get this. I just want to get this to Mars, and I think that is going to be a massive success in and of itself. And by the time it gets there, we'll have much better technology to chase after it. So, all of that said, we are going to go with the ASAP departure. Transit duration 362 days is what it is calculating, which means it is up here in this delicious light blue. We're going to create that node, and once again we see that we are going to be spending 3,761 meters per second at delta V, and that will get us to Mars. And so, as you can see, the issue has never been that I didn't have the delta V capability to get to another body. It's just, making it happen at the right time, with the right burn, with the right number of burns on a given stage, and that sort of thing. So that's what makes it complicated, not actually planning and packing enough fuel for the burn. All right, here we go. We are ullaging up. We are very slow. Oh, come on. Oh, man. Oh, that is disappointing. Okay, well, we have another engine failure, so we have lost the ability to get to Mars entirely. So, yeah, just pack it back in, and that is another failed launch. Man, that is a shame. All right, well, that was a little frustrating and a little disappointing that we put all that work into getting a good trajectory and talking about pork chop plots, which are not MacLeod specific, by the way. That's a real thing. But we did all that work and did all that discussion, and then wound up needing to scrap the whole mission because of a test light failure. And now we're going to have to do a little bit of triage on figuring out how we're going to recover our space program, because it looks like it's going to cost us about 135,000 funds and a huge amount of reputation to cancel or fail that contract. So that's a darn shame. So I'm going to spend some time trying to figure out what we can do next and how we can move forward. And I think that the way forward is through Venus, which we will be trying to get to in the next episode. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought, and I will see you next time.